thoracic cavity in the pleura. Now, in the thoracic cavity, the spongy lungs are occupying a major portion of the thoracic cavity and are enveloped in a serous cavity called the pleural cavity. There is always slight negative pressure in this cavity. During inspiration, the pressure becomes more negative and air is withdrawn into the lungs, covered with its visceral and the parietal layer of pleura. The visceral layer is inseparable from the lung and is supplied and drained by the same arteries, veins, and nerves as the lungs. In the similar manner, the parietal pleura follows the walls of the thoracic cavity with the cervical, the costal, the diaphragmatic, and the mediastinal parts. The pleural cavity limits the expansion of the lungs. Pleurae features like the peritoneum. The pleura is a serous membrane which is lined by mesothelium or the flattened epithelium. There are two pleural sacs, one on either side of the mediastinum. Each pleural sac is invaginated on its medial side by the lung so that it has an outer parietal layer and an inner layer, the visceral or the pulmonary pleura. The two layers are continuous with each other around the hilum of the lung and enclose between them a potential space called the pleural cavity. The pulmonary or the visceral pleura. The serous layer of the pulmonary pleura covers the surfaces and the fissures of the lung except at the hilum and along the attachment of the pulmonary ligament where it is continuous with the parietal pleura. It is firmly adherent to the lung and cannot be separated from it. Now, comparison. The visceral pleura is developing from the splanchno-pleuric mesoderm, whereas the parietal pleura from the somato-pleuric mesoderm lines the surface of the lung, including the fissures and the diaphragm. The parietal pleura lines the thoracic wall and the mediastinum. Nerve supply. The sympathetic nerves from T2 to T5 ganglia, and the parasympathetic from the vagus. The parietal pleura, thoracic nerves and the phrenic nerves are supplying it. It is insensitive to pain, the visceral pleura, whereas the parietal pleura is sensitive to pain, which may be referred. Blood supply. The visceral pleura is supplied by the bronchial vessels and the parietal pleura by the intercostal and the pericardiophenic vessels. Lymphatic drainage of the visceral pleura is by the tracheobronchial lymph node and the parietal pleura of the intercostal lymph nodes. Now, the surface marking of the lung or the visceral pleura. The apex of the visceral pleura coincides with the cervical pleura and is represented by a line upwards, this is point 1, rising 2.5 cm above the medial one-third of the clavicle. The anterior border of the right visceral pleura corresponds very closely to the anterior margin of the costo-mediastinal line of pleura and is obtained by joining point 2 sternoclavicular joint, point 3 median plane at the sternal angle. Point 4 in the median plane just above the xiphisternal point. The anterior border of the left visceral pleura corresponds to the anterior margin of the pleura up to the level of the fourth cochlear cartilage. Points 1 to 4 are on the left side. Now, in the lower part, it is presenting on the left side, it is presents with a cardiac notch of variable size from the level of the fourth costal cartilage. It passes laterally for 3.5 cm from the sternal margin, then curves downwards and medially to reach the sixth costal cartilage 4 cm from the median plane. In the region of the cardiac notch, the pericardium is covered only by a double layer of the pleura. The area of the cardiac notch is dull on percussion and is called the area of superficial cardiac dullness. The lower border of each pleura lies 2 ribs higher than the parietal pleural reflection. It crosses the sixth rib in the mid-clavicular line, the eighth rib in the mid-axillary line, and then the 10th rib in the lateral border of the rectus spinae, and ends 2 centimeter lateral to the 10th thoracic spine. Coming to the parietal pleura. The parietal pleura is thicker than the pulmonary pleura and is subdivided into the following 4 parts: the costal part, the diaphragmatic part, the mediastinal part, and the cervical part. The costal pleura lines the thoracic wall, which comprises of the ribs and the intercostal spaces, to which it is loosely attached by a layer of areolar tissue called the endothoracic fascia. The mediastinal pleura lines the corresponding surfaces of the mediastinum, reflected over the root of the lung, and becomes continuous with the pulmonary pleura around the hilum. The cervical pleura extends into the neck nearly 5 cm above the first costal cartilage and 2.5 cm above the medial 1/3 of the clavicle, covering the apex of the lung. Here it is covered by the suprapleural membrane. Cervical pleura is related anteriorly to the subclavian artery and the scalenus anterior, posteriorly to the neck of the first rib and structures lying over it, laterally to the scalenus medius, and medially to the large vessels of the neck. The diaphragmatic pleura lines the superior aspect of the diaphragm, covering the base of the lung, and gets continuous with the mediastinal pleura medially and the costal pleura laterally. So we have spoken about this before. Now coming to the pulmonary ligament. Here. The parietal pleura surrounding the root of the lung extends downwards beyond the root as a fold called the pulmonary ligament. This fold contains thin layer of loose areolar tissue with few lymphatics. It is actually providing a dead space into which the pulmonary veins can expand during increased venous return as an exercise. The lung roots can also descend into it with the descent of the diaphragm. The recesses of the pleura. There are 2 recesses of the parietal pleura which are acting as reserve spaces for the lung to expand during deep inspiration. The costo-mediastinal recess over here lies anteriorly. The costo-mediastinal recess behind the sternum and the costal cartilages, between the costal and the mediastinal pleurae, particularly in relation to the notch of the cardiac notch of the left lung. This recess is filled up by the anterior margin of the lungs. Even during quiet breathing, it is obvious in the region of the cardiac notch of the lung. The costodiaphragmatic or the costovertebral recess lies inferiorly between the costal and the diaphragmatic pleurae, vertically measuring about 5 centimeters and extending from the 8th to the 10th rib along the mid-axillary line. Nerve supply of the pleura. The parietal pleura develops from the somatopleuric layer of the lateral plate mesoderm and is supplied by the somatic nerves, which are the intercostal and the phrenic nerves. Therefore, it makes the parietal pleura pain sensitive. The costal and the peripheral parts of the diaphragmatic pleura are supplied by the intercostal nerves and the mediastinal pleura, and the central part of the diaphragmatic supplied by the phrenic nerves. The pulmonary pleura develops from the splanchnoid layer of the lateral plate mesoderm supplied by autonomic nerves. The sympathetic nerves are derived from the second to fifth sympathetic ganglia, while parasympathetic nerves are drawn from the vagus nerve. The nerves accompany the bronchial vessels. This part of the pleura is not sensitive to pain. Sympathetic system dilates the bronchi. The parasympathetic system narrows the bronchial tree and is also secretory to the glands. The parietal pleura is a part and parcel of the thoracic wall. Blood supply and lymphatic drainage are therefore the same as that of the body wall, supplied by the intercostal, internal thoracic, and the muscular phrenic arteries. The veins are draining mostly into the azygos and the